What's up, everybody? It's your best friend Patrick Fair from Fistful of Cards, and today we are continuing our deck building Doomtown Reloaded series. And today we are going to be talking about a Gateway to Beyond coverage deck out of Eagle Wardens. First and foremost, it is important that we talk about who this deck is for and what is our goal. Now, I could do an entire video on this, but for those who don't know, Eagle Wardens is a bit of a mess. So every Eagle Wardens deck is a bit janky in its own special way. So if you're the kind of player who likes to take advantage of janky, unusual cards in a janky, unusual faction, this one's for you. Our goal is to create a board state where our dudes can simultaneously position themselves to aggressively park on our opponent's deeds, while also protecting and being protected by our other dudes. And to do that, we're going to go through a bunch of tools that we have at our disposal. First and foremost, we can go over our value. Now, you may have noticed that we have 24 jacks. We actually don't have that many. I'm just going to talk about some other options in here that you can run instead of the card that I'm going to pick. We are a 16-16 structure with an extremely unreliable straight flush option in clubs from 9 to king. Going through the deck real quick here, the first thing that you should know is that we are running Gateway to Beyond. It is an 18 wealth 3 production home. What is unique about this home is that it has a trait. It is a holy ground. Its ability is Noon Boot. Choose a number of spirits up to the number of holy grounds you control. Unboot them. You can use their abilities an additional time. Now, there are people who have tried to take advantage of this by running a bunch of cards that turn different deeds into holy grounds and filling their deck with all the holy grounds or multiple copies of the holy grounds. We're not interested in that. We are interested in using this one time per turn, because it turns out using a powerful spirit or a powerful spell more than once a turn is in of itself actually a pretty good home. You don't actually have to build an entire sort of chain to take out as much advantage of this as you can. Just getting one extra trigger off of a spell is good enough a lot of the times. So, what do I mean by coverage deck? Well, we're going to go right into Buffalo Rifle. So, Buffalo Rifle is a core set card, but I guarantee you that most of the people watching this video have never actually played Buffalo Rifle. That's because in 90% of decks, it's just not very good. It is a 2-cost good. It is a weapon that does not provide any bullets. Its ability is if this dude is adjacent to the location of a shootout or a job's mark, they can join a posse without moving or booting, even if they're booted. Now, in most instances, this card doesn't matter because it's very, very expensive. It doesn't provide a bullet bonus. There's a lot of reasons why this card isn't commonly played. However, it is the perfect card for our Gateway to Beyond coverage deck. One, because it provides excellent coverage. It allows us to, as we talked about in our goal, it allows our dudes to, at the very least, nothing else. We can have a dude in town square, another dude on an opponent's steed, and if that dude gets called out at our opponent's steed, the guy in town square can cover him. He can join the fight without moving or booting, which can give us a little bit of extra oomph. It allows us to position our dudes such that everybody in the back line can cover the people in the front line, and so we can keep moving that front line further and further towards our opponent's deeds, and we can just park as many dudes as possible. The more Buffalo Rifles you have in play, the more you're able to cover different dudes across the board. If I have 2 dudes in town square with Buffalo Rifles, I obviously can cover 2. I can cover as many deeds as I want to, but it makes it safer and safer and safer to sit on your opponent's deeds. However, the main reason we're using Buffalo Rifle is for this card here, Strength of the Ancestors. It is a 0-cost spell. Its ability is that this dude gets +3 bullets, becomes a stud, and other players' card effects cannot boot them or send them home booted. The rider on this is these effects end if this dude leaves this location. So, technically speaking, Buffalo Rifle does not move you. And that's very specific. It's a very unique thing to Buffalo Rifle. Most cards that exist, like for example, there's a lot of horses like Roan or Pinto that get you into fights, but they move you into the fights. Buffalo Rifle keeps you where you are, so you will maintain this absurd bonus. So basically, with Buffalo Rifle, we ignore the huge downside of this card and just take full advantage of +3 bullets and becoming a stud. It also protects us against some cards that the deck is weak to. For example, if we're relying on buffalo rifles to protect our dudes on deeds, then something like Pistol Whip would essentially ruin our day. However, Strength of the Ancestors prevents your opponent's card effects from sending them home booted or booting them, which protects a couple of other investments. And another thing to keep in mind is that it does say other players, so we're allowed to boot our own guys, which we will be doing, as you'll see later. In addition, this is a fantastically hilarious card to use in Gateway to Beyond, because we can unboot it and use it again. So effectively, with one of these, we can turn our starting posse Matilda from a 2-draw. We could boot it once, make her a 5-stud, give her a buffalo rifle. She protects everybody with a 5-stud. We can unboot it and boot it again to make her an 8-stud, who can't be sent home booted or booted by our opponent's card effects, and who can cover essentially all in-town deeds and locations if we get her a buffalo rifle and send her to town square, which will be a primary goal. In addition, we have some support spells. We've got Turtle's Guard, one of the best spells in the entire game. I talked about Eagle Wardens being very janky. This is a huge exception to that rule. Turtle's Guard is a fantastic card. It is a resolution, and it is very unique in that it is an anti-cheating card that is not a cheating resolution. And so it essentially finds its home in the deck because it is a powerful resolution that also punishes our opponent for cheating. Designers of Doomtown, if you are listening, make more of this, because it is a fantastic way to include slightly below the curve cheating resolutions without having them compete directly with more powerful cheating resolutions, is by making them resolutions that care about your opponent cheating. Essentially, this is just a good card that will allow us to stick into fights, generate tokens that are harrowed so we can soak casualties. We also have Ghostly Communion, which will allow us some movement capability so our dudes can go. You're only allowed to move to the location of a holy ground or adjacent to one, while town square is adjacent to our home, and our home is a holy ground, and therefore we can move our dudes from our opponent's deeds or from anywhere to our home if we want to run away, or we can move them to town square if we want to get into a fight there, or if we want to just sort of make our opponent defending their deed a little bit less efficient. You can do things like, I move onto your deed, you move to block, I use Ghostly Communion to move to town square unbooted. You have to either boot home or boot somewhere else to get off of the deed. In addition, this does have some like loose synergy, some unreliable synergy with the fact that there are some pretty commonly played holy ground deeds. For example, St. Anthony's Chapel is a queen, excuse me, that is commonly played just because it's a efficient deed on queen that is a holy ground. So you might see holy grounds that your opponent's playing. Be sure to keep track of that. In terms of our supporting clubs here, we do run a straight flush thing that's a little bit cheeky. You'll also notice that I have 12 Jack of clubs. I'm not actually running that. As I said earlier in the video, we're just going to go through a couple of options and what's good and what's bad about each of them. Unprepared is just generically good. It's very, very powerful. It turns off a lot of things that are scary. This deck is particularly afraid of things like shotgun because of our low value starting posse, and unprepared is a way of dealing with that. We have It's Not What You Know and Point Blank, again, because they're fantastic. It's Not What You Know is particularly useful in this deck for the same reason it's very useful in the Bounty Hunter deck. We're not overly interested in getting to a ton of multi-round shootouts. We're more of a sort of one-and-done shootout kind of deck, and this deck, once again, is very, very powerful. Or this card is very, very powerful in this kind of deck. Point Blank, again, it's going to be here all the time. This is the Point Blank deck building series. Strength of the Ancestors makes this card just cover everybody. I can make a 5-stud out of my starting posse extremely easy, and Point Blank makes it so that you can just target anybody you want, or your opponent is forced to pick from all options. We don't really have a way of making this better like we have in other decks, but it's still just fantastic. Your opponent still has to ace a dude. It is a resolution, so if you're winning low ball, you can prevent your opponent from using their Willamay or something like that if they're forced to ace them before they get to trigger them. And now that leads us to our jacks. We have three options here. Flight of the Lepus, Outgun. This is a holdup. Now all three of these are sort of goofy cards in their own right, and all of them are viable, and any combination of them is particularly viable. I'm going to actually recommend this as a holdup, which is an extremely not played card. It's actually a very bad card in most cases, but much like the rest of this deck, we have a lot of things that let us take advantage of that. For one, we do have Ghostly Communions, we do have Buffalo Rifles, both of which will allow us to escape or to support. This is a holdup, which is generally a very risky move. It allows us to rob our opponent's money, which is good, and it's on theme with our aggressive deck that allows us to sit on our opponent's deeds, which blocks production, and we can rob them, which further lowers their cash income. And that allows us to stay ahead of the curve, which is why I would recommend running at least a few of this as a holdup. The other options are Outgun, which is basically just a weaker point blank. The reason I don't like this is it requires us to boot our leader, which oftentimes will be our unbooted dude with the Buffalo Rifle in town square, because they will have the Strength of the Ancestors. And while we can do that, as opposed to Point Blank, which just out and out aces someone, Outgun for me has never quite worked as well as it is, and I just don't like the fact that it specifically is the leader, because oftentimes I'll use a backup stud or something like that to boot and use the Point Blank, because like I've said in previous videos, even one bullet is powerful enough to make Point Blank worth it in a lot of situations. And so in this particular deck, I think Outgun is not very good. However, if you think otherwise, I encourage you to test it out and let me know your results. Flight of the Lepus is a very good card. However, it is just more anti-cheating. So I'm not sure if it's necessary. We do have a Ricochet. We do have It's Not What You Know. We do have Turtle's Guard, which is technically not an anti-cheating card, or is not a cheating resolution, but is an anti-cheating card. So I don't think running it... I think running maybe one Flight of the Lepus might be correct, but I certainly don't think running 4 is correct. And so that actually brings us to the close of our very quick deck building guide. Remember that the goal of the deck is to put Buffalo Rifles and Strength of the Ancestors on dudes. Specifically in our starting posse, we have Matilda, who is perfect for both of those cards. Park them in town square and defend your more mobile shamans in your deck, who are there to block your opponent's production with Ghostly Communion, allowing us a lot of coverage of what we're capable of doing with less risk than the average deck, and it also allows us a certain amount of mobility, a certain amount of shootout presence that other decks might not have. We also have access to some janky cards that your opponent will definitely not be expecting, as well as some classics like Unprepared and Point Blank, which are very, very powerful effects. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video and are appreciating the shorter format. Let me know in the comments what you thought. If you loved it, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And I will see you guys next time.